Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and get started with the next section of our course. And in this section, now that we understand the basics of working with the Dreamweaver window, defining websites, and creating pages within those websites, we're now ready to start learning about the two core languages of the web, HTML and CSS. Now, a lot of people start to get worried when we start talking about learning HTML and CSS. But don't let that topic scare you at all. The basics of HTML and CSS are fairly straightforward, fairly easy to understand, and that's what we're going to restrict ourselves to in this class. So while there are definitely more complex elements within HTML and CSS and more advanced ways to use those two languages, for this class we're going to be worried about really the fundamentals of what you need to know from those languages. And everybody should have received a confirmation email for this class. And in the confirmation email, you should have received two handouts: an HTML vocabulary and grammar basics handout and a CSS vocabulary and grammar basics handout. And these two documents are going to have all of the notes for the material that we cover in this section of the course. And if I go ahead and open up the HTML one, you'll see here are all of the notes from this particular section. But most importantly, what I want to do is point to this HTML vocabulary list section here. And this is going to basically list the essential vocabulary, the essential elements that you need to understand in order to be able to use HTML well. And you can see here there are really just a little more than 24 items that you need to understand in order to really understand the fundamentals of HTML. So this is not something that is going to be difficult for you by any means. And we won't even need to go through all of these different elements in today's class by any means. We will go through some of these elements in more advanced classes, but this is the essentials that you need to understand about HTML. And the CSS handout basically has the same thing. We have our notes and then a CSS properties vocabulary list. And there are actually even fewer CSS terms that you need to understand in order to effectively use this language. So don't let the thought of learning HTML and CSS discourage you at all from this. All right, I'm going to go back into Dreamweaver, and we have our Dreamweaver project that we've been working on. Now, the first thing that we should begin to understand about HTML and CSS is what they're actually used for. What do we use HTML and CSS for? And I usually describe building a web page like building a building. There are really four different aspects to every building. Every building has a structure to it. The columns and the beams and all of that that go to building the core of the building. So every building has a structure. And every building also has an appearance. You just don't see a building that's composed of beams and columns. You see that there we put up drywall and you paint and you put carpet down, and there's a certain element or an aspect to every building that has to do not with its structure but with the way we want the building to appear. So every building has a structure, but every building also has appearance in them. In addition to that, buildings also contain content. once we have our carpet and our paint all done, we move things into the building. We move file cabinets and desks and all that type of stuff. So every building is going to have a structure, every building is going to have an appearance, and every building is going to have content. And then finally, once we have all those three elements in our building, things can occur in the building. Actions can take place. People come into the buildings, they sit at the desk, they do different things. So things happen, actions happen in the building. So every building has structure, appearance, content, and action. Now, each one of those four different aspects is usually accomplished by a different language. In our case, we're just going to focus on the first two of those, the structure and the appearance. When it comes to the structure of a web page, that's what we use HTML for. We don't use HTML to define the way our page is going to look. We use HTML to define the structure of how our page is going to be created. It's CSS that we use to define the appearance of our web page. So HTML, we create the structure, we also put the content into it, and CSS is where we define the appearance of our website. Now, if I go ahead and open up our main.html file that we've been working with, and remember in Dreamweaver there are these different view buttons up here, and we're in code view right now, but we're going to be going back and forth between code view and design view. Now, when we actually start creating our HTML, we're going to delete all this and start over from scratch. But before we do that, I want to point out to you a couple of different items here. First of all, you can see the word hello here. And that's actual content that appears on our page. We also see welcome to my website, that phrase we typed in earlier. And again, you can see that in code view. But in addition to the actual content that's displayed to the user when they actually look at a web page, there are also these other weird looking elements here. And these are actually called tags. They're called HTML tags. Now, HTML tags usually are fairly easy to know what they do because the tag itself gives you a clue. Here I have a P tag, and a P tag is what a paragraph is contained inside of. Later we're going to learn about headings. Headings are in H tags. We will learn about unordered lists. Unordered lists are in UL tags. We'll learn about creating different divisions on our page, and divisions are created with a tag called a div tag. So usually the actual letters that go to make up the tag will give you a good clue as to what the tag actually does. Here we have the title tag. And again, that HTML vocabulary handout that I showed you just a moment ago will go into each one of these tags and tell you what they actually do. But again, many of them are very self-explanatory. Now, you know something is a tag because the tag is contained inside of brackets here, the less than and the greater than sign. So whenever you see anything in HTML that has the brackets around it, the greater than and less than signs, you know that that's a tag. In addition, every tag has an opening and every tag has a closing. or I should say almost every tag. You're going to see an exception to that a little bit later. But here we see we have our opening paragraph tag, or our opening p tag, and then we have our closing p tag. So whenever there's an opening tag, there's a closing tag. And that's basically telling the browser, when you display this particular piece of content, the paragraph begins here and the paragraph ends here. And you can tell the difference between an opening tag and a closing tag very simply because the closing tag has this slash next to it. So that's the only difference between an opening tag and a closing tag. Here we see we have title, and that's the opening tag, and here we see we have the closing title tag. Now, sometimes tags contain more than just a word or a sentence. For example, our earlier example, hello, the p tag begins here and it closes here. But when we look at this HTML tag called body, we're going to see that there is no immediate closing body tag, is there? The actual closing tag is all the way down here. And in this sense, and let me go ahead and put some lines and some indentation in here. In this sense, the body tag contains these three elements, or these three paragraphs, in the same way as this paragraph just contains a word, and this paragraph contains 4 words or 2 words. The body tag actually contains 3 paragraph tags inside of it. If we look up here, we'll see we have an HTML tag called head, and that's actually got a couple of different items inside of it. And then you're also going to notice that we have an HTML tag up here at the top. And the HTML tag is actually closed all the way down here at the bottom. So in this sense, the HTML tag contains everything in the head section as well as everything in the body section. And the actual word for this is called nesting. These paragraph tags are nested inside of the body tag. And we're going to see that more about that later. Now I said earlier, whenever there's an opening tag, there's going to be a closing tag. And that actually isn't true. There are some examples of tags that you don't put a closing tag on. For example, the very first tag that we're going to find in our HTML document is called a doc type tag. And don't worry about what that does right now, but just notice that there is no closing doc type tag to match this. In the same way, here we have a meta tag, and the meta tag, there's no closing, there's no bracket / meta after that, the way there is with the title tag. So meta tags are another example of some HTML tags that do not have closing elements on them. And fortunately for us, there's just about half a dozen tags in HTML that don't have closing elements on them. And I will point those out to you as we go. But for right now, what I want you to remember is that HTML is composed of tags, and the tags are contained inside of brackets, and more often than not, the tag itself will give you a hint as to what it actually contains, such as the title tag and the p tag. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and delete some information here. And now we're down to really what is the bare bones of an HTML page. This is the basic structure that every HTML page has. Every HTML tag begins with a doc type statement, and you could type this into your page manually just like that. After the doc type statement, you're going to have opening and closing HTML tags. Opening and closing HTML tags. Inside of your opening and closing HTML tags, you're going to have two other sections, a head section and a body section. So your HTML tags contain two sections, head and body. Now, the head section we're not going to deal with too much in this class. We do need to put a few lines of information in there. The body section is going to be mainly what we work with in this class. The difference between the head and the body is simple. The head contains any instructions that you need to give the browser about that web page. So anytime you want to tell the browser something, you put that instruction in the head section. For example, a little bit later, we're going to say that a CSS style sheet is linked to this HTML page. And since that's something the browser needs to know, we're going to put it in the head section. But for right now, just remember the head section contains information for the browser. The body section contains content that our user is going to see. So when somebody comes and looks at our web page, the things that they see are going to be contained in the body section, not in the head section. And you'll remember we were able to create paragraphs very simply by using a p tag. So I'm going to go ahead and type a p tag in there, and I'm going to type hello world, and then I'm going to go ahead and close that paragraph tag. I'm going to save this document, and when I go ahead and take a look at this in Design View, you're going to see nothing is there. But if I was to put this exact same piece of code in my body section, now you're going to see that it's there. So your website visitor will never see anything in your head section. They're only going to see material that you place in the body section of your document. Now, paragraph tags are probably the most common tags that you're going to go ahead and use in HTML. But there are also heading tags, and those are going to be very commonly used. Now, just like in a book, you may have main headings and then subheadings underneath it that organize the contents of, let's say, a chapter. In HTML, we can have different heading levels. And there are actually 6 different heading levels that you can use in HTML. The main heading, or the first level heading, is created by using an H1 tag, or a first level heading tag. And I'm just going to type main heading on page. And again, where we have an opening tag, we always have a closing tag. So I open my first level heading, and then I close my first level heading. And when we look at this in Design View, you can see, sure enough, there's a big heading on our page. And your font, by the way, may look a little bit different than mine. It may be in Times New Roman instead of Arial. Don't let that worry you right now. So we have paragraphs, and we can also have headings. If I wanted to do, let's say, a second level heading, I could do H2. And again, I'm going to go ahead and close that tag. And when we look at this in design view, you can see there's a slightly smaller second level heading. I can hit enter after that and type in another paragraph tag. You're also going to notice, and one of the things that Dreamweaver helps you out is by speeding up what it knows you want to do. So it knows that after I have an opening p tag, I should have a closing p tag coming up. When I type a bracket and a slash, you can see it automatically put the p and the closing bracket there. So Dreamweaver helps you out as you type. And you're also going to notice as you type an opening bracket, Dreamweaver actually gives you a list of every possible HTML tag that you can use here. And you can see there are a lot of them in here. Some of them that we've used, like the heading tags and the P tag, and a lot that we haven't used, and a lot that nobody uses at all. But you can see Dreamweaver gives you that hint there. And those hints are going to be more valuable when we work with CSS. And so I'm going to go ahead and save that. We look at this in design view. Now you can see those elements there. So really simple to create some simple HTML for our web page. The main thing I want you to take away from this is that, again, HTML is not something that's terribly difficult or complicated to use. A lot of the tags are very, very self-explanatory. It's just knowing exactly how to use them. Now, if you go into Dreamweaver's design view, you can also directly type information onto a page. And design view, one of its uses is going to be entering content in. If I was typing a long paragraph out, doing it in this view here wouldn't be too terribly easy. But I can come into this view here and I can go ahead and just hit enter and type this is more text I'm placing on my page. More text, more text. And it's going to automatically put in that information there. Now, a couple of things I want you to notice. First off, when I was typing my HTML in, everything was nice and lined up. It was nice and clean. One of the reasons why a lot of people don't like using design view is because when they come back in here to code view, things are going to get kind of sloppy in here. And you can very easily clean that up just by highlighting a line and hitting tab to move things over. But a lot of people like working in code view because it allows them to keep everything nice and clean and straightforward. You'll see it actually bump my body paragraph items over there a little bit more. So now we're back to seeing things look more the way they should. As I give myself more or less space in this area, you're going to notice that some of these lines of code, this one in particular, will wrap if you have less space. If you don't like that text wrapping, and I really don't like the text wrapping because it sort of throws off when I'm trying to find something, this button right here in your code view toolbar, that will toggle the line wrapping off or on. But I want you to notice when I go into design view, nothing here has been affected by the spacing in my code view. Even if the wrapping is turned on for this line here, and I bump some of that text down, well, there's still enough room right here for that, so it's not going to break over. Indenting this in by using my tab key is not going to affect anything here in the way my visitor would see my page. If I bring those back over, and let's say I add a whole bunch of spaces here, save that, look at this in design view, none of those extra spaces are actually showing up. If you want spaces, there's certainly an easy way to put spaces into your code, but any of the extra lines that you put in or the indenting that you do in code view here to make your code more readable, none of that is going to actually affect design view or the way somebody actually sees our web page. And this goes even to the point of, let's say I'm in my hello world line here, and let's say I put in a whole bunch of spaces. Well, you'd think that space would show up, but it didn't. So HTML completely ignores extra lines, indentation that you may do, or any extra spaces that you might put into your code. So feel free to use spacing and indentation in order to make your code more readable. And this is true for both HTML and for CSS. Now, oftentimes when we're looking at a web page, you're going to notice that there are distinct areas on the web page. And here we can see our class project and also the template that we're going to use for the class project. And I want you to notice here, we sort of have a top section here that has the company name and slogan. And then over here to the right, we've got our navigation section with links to our different pages. Then below that, we have a banner area. Below that, we have a content area and a sidebar area. And then finally, down at the bottom, we have our footer area. So there's actually a name area, a navigation area, a banner area, a content area, a sidebar area, and a footer area. We position these different elements by placing them inside of their own division or div. So you use divs to define the different areas that are on your page. So here again, I would have a name div, a navigation div, a banner div, a content div, a sidebar div, and a footer div. And you create those divs very, very easily by just going and putting the HTML tag div into your page. And here, since these elements are inside of this opening and closing div, I may use my indentation to bump that over so it's a little bit more obvious on that. I can come up here and create another div and then do, let's say, an H1 and type company name, enter. let's say an H2. This is the slogan or tagline. So now I have two divisions, one for my name area and one for my content area. Notice that when we're looking at our page here, Dreamweaver very helpfully puts these dotted lines around our different divs so that we can see what's contained in one div and what's contained in another div. So these dotted lines here, that's what that means. If we were actually looking at our page, and I can click on live view right here, right now, we actually won't see those dotted lines. So somebody actually looking at our page would not see this. They would only see the content. And that's very important. Design view is a layout view. It's meant to show you something about the layout of your page. Whereas live view is meant to show you a more accurate representation of the way somebody would actually see the content on your page. So there is a very important distinction between design view and live view. And they are both very important for creating web pages. But don't worry about these dotted lines that you see in design view or other little symbols or codes that might appear. All that is Dreamweaver's visual aids for your layout. If you want to see the way somebody's actually going to see your page, click on live view right here and you'll get that idea. So I'm going to come back in here to code view, and I can come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to create another div, and this one's going to be for the footer. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a paragraph in here. Copyright 2013. All rights reserved. Whatever. So you put anything you want in there. I messed up the date a little bit, but you get the point. And then I've got to come down here and I need to close that div tag. So now I've got a footer section, a main content section, and I've also got this name section. In our sample web page, we can see here I also have a sidebar section. So let's go ahead and after this content div, I'm going to create another div, and I'm just going to go ahead and actually copy and paste some of this here into my page. Whoops, there we go. So now I've got a chunk of text to put in here. So I can come along here and type H2, sidebar heading, and then I can open up a paragraph and place a paragraph of text in that sidebar area. And again, I can scroll on over here, and I'm just going to go ahead and close off that div. Our final example, or our final section that we need to create, is this little section up here for our links. But before we do that, I want to show you a couple more HTML tags that we're going to need to understand. And these are unordered lists. And unordered lists are contained inside of UL tags. Again, continuing our tradition of having the tag name actually tell you a little bit about what that tag is. So UL stands for unordered list. Now, every list is going to have items within it. And so if you want to define an individual list item within a list, you can go ahead and type an opening LI tag, and then I can type something into that tag. In this case, we'll do just a list of names here. And you'll see how, oops, I did LL there. I needed to do LI, Mary Jones. And then we'll do one more, Peter Green. So now I have an unordered list here with 3 individual list items inside of it. And when we look at this in design view, you're going to see there is my bulleted list or my unordered list. By default, unordered lists of information show up with the bullets next to it. But again, we could use CSS to easily format that. Now, the reason why I bring that up at this point is now we're going to go ahead and do, whoops, this top navigation section right up here. And there are 4 elements inside of this for our 4 different links. Whenever you have a list of links or a list of navigation elements in an HTML page, you're always going to put them inside of an unordered list. Now, this doesn't look like a list, but it actually is. It's a list that the elements are being displayed side by side without any bullet instead of being placed in a vertical orientation here. Now, the reason why this is important is later on when you want to do more things with your navigation, the only way to actually do that, for instance, to have colored squares appear or to have your highlight come up or to space things out evenly, the only way to do that is to have your navigation elements inside of your or inside of an unordered list like this. So when I come up here to create my div to put, and you can see a lot of times I close my div even before I've put any content inside of it. The easiest way to create that unordered list for our top navigation is just like this. Welcome. About. Sample page. Contact. So now I have 4 different pieces of text that can be made into hyperlinks to jump from page to page. Now, creating links is very, very simple. You just need to know the name of the page that you're going to be linking to. Now, this requires a little bit of forethought because we haven't actually created the home page or the welcome page or the about page or the sample page or the contact page. All we have is this main.html page that we've been working in. So I've got to think up my names I'm going to use for my pages ahead of time. Fortunately, they're going to be probably fairly simple. The welcome page is going to be my home page. Now, the home page is actually the only page in your website that has to have a specific name. Any other page you can name whatever you want. For example, if I come here to my about page here, I could name this page about.html. I could name this sample.html, this contact.html. But your home page, that first page that you're website visitors see when they go to your website always needs to have the name index.html. It always needs to be called index.html. Everything else you can name your pages whatever you want, but that home page, you need to call it index.html. Now, I've highlighted the word welcome because that's the text that's going to be the link to that page. Notice I didn't highlight the LIs here, just the word welcome. Now, this is another case where Dreamweaver can really speed up working on your web pages. Because instead of typing in all the details about that link, all I have to do is come down here to my properties panel. Now, if you're ever in Code View and your properties panel looks like this, just click refresh and these options will reappear. So I've highlighted welcome, and I'm going to come down here and click in the index box, and I'm just going to type the name of my page, index.html, and then hit enter, and you're going to notice that it went ahead and placed the code for my link into my page. I can do the same thing with about. One thing I would recommend, even though you can name your pages anything you want, I'd recommend naming them in all lowercase letters. So I'm coming down here to contact and typing contact.html. So now I have, when I look at this in design view, you can see those links have changed into blue. I now have 4 links on my page. Notice I haven't done anything at all with formatting, and that's because we're still working on HTML, not on CSS. And CSS is where we go in and format everything or set up the appearance for everything. I want you to notice, though, that the A tag here actually has some information inside of it. href equals, quote, index.html, close quote. So instead of just having an opening A tag like that, the contents, and then the closing A tag, it has some extra information in it. Many of the tags that we work with inside of HTML, the only thing that you need is the actual tag itself. H tags, P tags, those are good examples of that. But oftentimes, you do need to include some additional information about a particular tag. In the case of an A tag, and A is one of those cases where the name of the tag doesn't really tell you what the tag does, the way LI or UL is. A actually stands for anchor, and you can think of that as short for a link tag. An A tag is a link tag. And that's a little bit confusing because there actually is a link tag in HTML. There actually is a link tag, and we will use it very shortly, but it's not for creating page links. For creating page links, you use the A tag. The other information that the A tag needs is what page should it open when you click on this link. And that's what this is right here. It's the additional information that the browser needs to successfully use that A tag or that anchor tag. And this is called an attribute. An attribute. So we have tags, and some tags have attributes such as the A tag. Now, for right now, we're not really going to deal with any other with any other attributes except for the A tag. But there is another very common and very important attribute that you're going to need to include with some of your tags, namely your div tags. Remember before when we were looking at our sample page, we said this was the name area, this was the top navigation area, this was the banner area, the content area, the sidebar area, and the footer area. Just using a div tag doesn't give this section a name or an identification. But we need some way to identify that particular div. For when we go into CSS, we need to be able to refer to content that's in the name div. So you're going to give every div on your page an ID. And that ID needs to be one word. In this case, I'm going to call that top area name. And I'm going to go ahead and call this top nav. And I'll scroll down here. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to ID that as content. And notice here the format always remains the same for your attribute. It's always the attribute name equals and then the attribute value inside of quotes. So there I go. I've gone ahead and given each one of my divs an ID. And whenever you create a div, it's always a good idea to give it a name, to give it an ID, so that you can refer to that in your CSS or when you learn JavaScript, when you dive into that. So divs should always have IDs inside of them. You can actually give an ID to anything at all. If I wanted to give an ID to this UL or to these individual list items or to this paragraph, anything that I want to be able to call out in my CSS, I'm going to always give an ID to. So here is the resulting HTML from all of our effort. And we haven't put any images in. We're going to deal with images in a little bit. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We've been at this for a little while. We'll take a break for 10 minutes. And when we come back, we're going to begin to look at CSS. And we're going to begin to write some CSS to accompany our HTML. So our web page will actually begin to look the way we want it to. So I will see you in 10 minutes. We will continue.